Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. Today we're talking about teen alcohol use and abuse, and basically how you rather can recognize that something's not quite right. Um, like I'm a clinical psychologist. I minored in addiction studies when I was in college or grad school, and I've done tons of alcohol and drug abuse evaluations, um, and so I'm pretty sensitive to things that indicate signs of abuse. But on most, well, it's just not something you look for, and kids are way more sophisticated than they were when I was a kid. We knew, if the big deal to do when I was a kid, or in teenage year anyway, was smoke cigarettes. That was a big deal. When I knew of no drug abuse at all, and I knew some of the older guys, like when they were 18 or so, pretty close to, well, it was legal in some states, but uh, where I would have some beers once in a while, but it wasn't like it was a big abuse thing. Since I've been in private practice, I have seen tons and tons of kids who've gotten themselves really deeply into alcohol abuse. And a lot of them, once they start down that path, they start also using and abusing other substances, and a lot of times the parents are totally clueless that this is going on. So, want to just kind of give you about, oh, 10 or 12 symptoms of or signs that things are not going well in your household. Okay, one of the biggest ones is irritability. The Their moods get weird when they're, especially when they get into abuse. Occasional drink or something isn't going to be that big a deal as far as uh, showing up, but when they start becoming regular drinkers, um, and alcohol has a much more important impact on ADHDers than it does on neurotypicals. Again, it's that dopamine thing. Uh, when you first start drinking, it secretes helps your brain secrete dopamine. When you get into abuse, however, it's the opposite thing happens, is that excessive alcohol use starts to slow down dopamine, or well, it starts to destroy dopamine receptors in your brain. So the dopamine has less of an impact, and it takes more and more and more to get the same feeling. And the feeling is pleasant. So that's why probably all of us who drink alcohol uh, do it. I mean, it's certain. I would hazard it's never for the taste. Okay. Uh, okay. So, one of the things that happens is all of a sudden we get irritability and mood changes, and it's unpleasant to be around, and not happy making in any way. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, there's so much to think about with ADHD by itself. And then we've got this on top of it. We're even more emotional. We even have less control of emotions. Oh, anyway, then if they really get into it, grades start to slip. It's hard to do all the stuff that you need to do in most school systems with ADHD by itself. But if you add alcohol on top of it, it makes it real difficult, and their grades will slip, sometimes spectacularly. sometimes kind of slow, gradual fade. And then the next thing is, although Lord knows they don't really need it, um, risk taking and impulsive behaviors will increase. Uh, Now, I know from my own children that if the guys aren't sure whether or not they can make a jump on their mountain bikes, guess who goes first to see if it's possible? Yeah, the ADHD kid. So they're already prone to be risk takers. And then on top of that, um, you add alcohol. And I mean, I know probably most of us have done something kind of stupid and risky when we were drinking. But it's exaggerated with an ADHDer. Okay, so they're going to be impulsive. They're going to take more risks. Their probably injury rate is probably going to go up. They're going to come in with bruises and scrapes and scratches, and you're going to wonder what's going on. And they'll give you some. Well, I mean, they'll probably tell you that, oh yeah, I tried to do that jump over behind Dan's house and crashed and burned. Oh, okay, but if it's something that they don't normally do, risk wise, you need to be aware of that. Okay, and then their sleep patterns will get even. I mean, it's sleep patterns are always a touchy thing in an ADHD household, but they get way worse if there's a lot of drinking going on. It'll be some combination of staying up all night and then sleeping all day the next day, or it's not a balance. It's always way up or it's way down, and it's totally disrupted, and it's not really a lot of fun for the parents to be around. And then, of course, the next thing we're going to talk about is the sweet smell of the hops. Alcohol, virtually all alcohol, because a lot of it is dealt with by the lungs, leaves a very strong odor on the person who's using it. It part of metabolizing alcohol is that it goes through the lungs. And so most alcoholics, hardcore people, will switch to what they call the clears, which is vodka mostly, and gin occasionally, because they smell less. They're less strong odors, And I mean, I did the alcohol evaluations when I was in the Air Force, and the people who were trying to sneak were always the ones who had a bottle of vodka in the trunk of their car, because they could most of the time get away with that. And then, of course, there's always the chewing gum, mouthwash sort of thing. Is it doesn't really cover it up. It just makes it, who's that? But the aroma, they're trying to cover the aroma. They can only partially do that because your lungs are just. And I remember when I was a kid, I worked an adolescent myself. I worked on golf courses. I did greenskeeping, mowing greens and digging holes and installing irrigation and all that. It's hot out there, and in the sun all the time. And we'd get these guys that were just looking for seasonal. I was up in New England, so it was seasonal labor to work on a golf course. You didn't work year round. One or two guys would stay over the winter and get the equipment in order. But for most of them, it was a summer job. So you got a lot of people who didn't work there regularly. And some of those guys, you'd be out working with them, and when they started sweating, it was like, oh my God, it smells like a brewery around here. And they're not necessarily aware of that, but that's also okay. And then, of course, there are all the physical symptoms, the things that people associate with uh, hangovers and that sort of stuff, or being actively drunk. You get the bloodshot eyes, you get the slurred. Well, when they're actually drunk, you get slurred speech, you get gait disturbances. I have relatives, and every once in a while they get lit and call, and you could always tell, oh, Fred's been hitting the sauce again, they're babbling and going in all directions and not making much sense and keep repeating themselves. All of these are indications that we got an alcohol problem. We got an issue. And one of the other things that happens is social withdrawal. They just kind of give up their old friends, quit hanging around with the family at all, and they probably established a whole new gang of friends who you probably don't approve of, and who you probably never see at your house because they're always going off and meeting somewhere in the park or in the back where the woods are or whatever. But um, they're a new crowd, and they're probably not one you're real happy about. And then, of course, we have lying and trying to hide things from us. The Well, social withdrawal, I guess we'll call it. They're trying to protect their privacy because they're doing some things privately that you would be upset to know about. They lock their doors to their rooms all the time. They get real upset if somebody goes into their room. uh, you know, Somebody wants to drop off the clean laundry or something in their room. What are you doing in my room? That kind of thing. You get a lot of problems with that. And they're really overly sensitive about all that sort of things. And of course, they're probably got a stash somewhere. And some of them are brazen enough to do it right in their rooms. Others will do it in the garage or other places, and I'm not sure what the difference is, honestly, but I know when I was doing a lot of substance abuse evaluations, the alcoholics were the most infuriating because they were the biggest liars, and they were always trying to tell you what they thought you wanted to know, and so they could get away with it. Um, it was They were real irritating as an evaluator, and I did a rotation in the inpatient alcohol rehab unit, and it was they just they'd lie, and they'd go out and they'd be in good enough shape on the unit that they got a pass, a weekend pass maybe, or a weekday pass, and then they'd get drunk as lords, and then they'd come in the next work day and just lie about everything that they'd been doing, until the blood alcohol say, "Whoops, you've been screwing up." Uh, it was funny because the other kinds of substance abusers tended to be pretty, well, yeah, I do that, so what, but they weren't as devious. Okay, then they talk about alcohol giving you false courage. Um, the cowboy, before he goes out for the shootout in the street, he has a couple of shots of liquor, whiskey, ma'am, whiskey. And but it alcohol causes increased defiance because it reduces your social limitations, your social judgment, the way you, oh, I better not say that. This will get him upset, and he's a big guy, and I don't want to do alcohol when when you're drinking. The whole false courage thing. You'll, yeah, what's it's you get more fights in bars than say you do at gyms. Okay, even though basketball playing players have a lot of yelling and screaming at each other, there's usually not a lot of fist fights. But in bars or any place kids are drinking, you'll see a lot more defiance, a lot more arguments. And when things get really bad at your house, they start staying out all night, and it's a well, it's obviously unpleasant, and think bad things are going on. And now the next thing is, once alcohol starts to become a major part of their social life, they drop a lot of other things. If they played sports, they'll drop out of those. They were in clubs or that sort of thing. They'll quit that. They quit hanging with the social crowd, the kids that they grew up with, that, you knew their parents real well, and all that stuff. They withdraw from that too, because now they've got different friends, and these friends like to, steal liquor and all that sort of stuff. And there are some really sneaky sort of things that are done. I'm sure most of us are aware that at least some of their friends used to steal liquor from their parents and pour water in to make up the difference. Uh, and just other ways of getting a supply of alcohol. Older friends who buy for them, and some in some cases you had parents who would buy for them. Oh, he's got to learn to drink like a man. Uh, yes, as an adult parent of a child, you are a model, and you show your kids how to drink. I mean, it's not a it's not a course. It is certainly not anything most of us probably think about, but that's one of those things. They watch us and how we do it, and how we handle alcohol, and if getting drunk is appropriate in our house, if accepted in our house, uh, they get that too. They absorb that. So um, how you handle that yourself has a big impact on your kids. With alcoholism in general, different uh, societies have different levels of difficulties with it, and it's not the amount of drinking necessarily; it's the social aspects of it. Like, for instance, France and Italy have roughly the same pattern of drinking. They drink a lot of wine. They mostly drink it with meals. Da 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 da. But France has a very high rate of alcoholism, whereas Italy has very little, and it's totally about the social aspects of it. You know, the the Italian mother. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but sort of my baby, my boy. Oh, it's and those kids rarely become alcoholic. But French, it's there's a high rate, and it's just a difference in the society and the messages that the kids are given. Um, it's well, it's longer than more than will probably be covering today. But I mean, the deals you've got, there are signs that there's a drinking problem going on. you need to be sensitive to them. Not necessarily intrusive, but you've got to be sensitive to, to this. And, at some stage in their lives, they're going to drink, or they're going to at least try it and see if they like it or don't like it, or, and some people, I said before, I worked with a lot of alcoholics. Some people would tell you, I had a problem for the first drink I ever took, because folks who drink a lot they metabolize alcohol slightly differently than people who don't have alcohol problems. So it's a big issue. And we're not very good at teasing that out, as far. We wait until people get into trouble, then we intervene. And sometimes the interventions aren't all that wonderful, but especially for younger drinkers. But the Alcoholics Anonymous is still, it's been around since the 1930s, and it's still a very active program for most people with substance abuse issues. Most of the programs, local, they're all kind of local, but they don't have, as far as I know now, I could need some correction on this. As far as I know, they don't work with a lot of adolescents, but I don't think they rule out working with somebody who's not an independent adult. Okay, and you need to take this stuff seriously, because alcohol is, we all worry about heroin and all that sort of thing, but alcohol is dangerous too. More people die of alcohol poisoning, some variation of that, than probably any other substance that is abused. So you need to take it seriously. You need to set a good example yourself, and you need to be aware, not hyper about it, not intrusive about it, but just be aware. Don't go just thinking, oh, everything's fine, no problems. But he's sure chewing a lot of gum. Okay, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. I will get around to changing it to ADHD Chat with Dr. G sometime. And I do coaching, and I'm going to start doing some webinars, I think. This podcasting, I enjoy it, but I think I might be more helpful in a two-way chat on Zoom or something for doing a webinar. But let me know what you think about that idea. And please let me know any questions you've got, any other areas you'd like me to cover. Okay, we will catch you next week, and let's do all we can to make the world safer for ADHD and more sensitive to ADHD. Bye.